Welcome to week 5, looking at consciousness. And consciousness is an interesting topic because we take for granted how conscious we are. And I think you're going to find this fairly interesting. The early work done by Freud and by William James, they looked at consciousness and unconscious mind. But more recently, we look at consciousness and subconsciousness. So we're going to look at the definition of what is consciousness, and then we're going to go look at a variety of things in terms of what helps us pay attention in terms of, the 24-hour cycle called the circadian rhythm. We're also going to be looking at altered states. And in this first week, in week 5 here, and looking at this chapter, we're going to look at the altered state of sleep, and looking at disrupted sleep or sleep disorders. And so that's what this particular week will be on. So good luck with this, and I hope that you get some information out of this that will help you, and we'll carry on with this for next week as well. We'll carry on with the second chapter, okay? Very good, and good luck, and keep up the good work.
Okay, like I was mentioning, now consciousness has been under a lot of sort of research based by a bunch of people over the years, and consciousness and unconscious mind was certainly, as I mentioned before, by Freud and James, but it's more currently looked at as consciousness and subconsciousness. Consciousness is more seen as, in terms of the definition, as the awareness of external events and internal sensations, including awareness of yourself, that is your own sense of who you are, and thoughts about your own experience. So that's everything that you can be aware of at any given time. This could be your thoughts, your feelings, sensations from any of your sense organs, and anything outside of you or your external stimuli is what that would be. So consciousness is any of those things. So at any given moment that you are aware of what's going on around you is your consciousness. Now, there are alternatives to consciousness, and we're going to look at those in a moment. But when you think about what you could consider, and it's a little exercise you might want to try sometime, it's what's called stream of consciousness. And this was coined by William James, and the concept is that the mind is in continuous flow of sensations, images, thoughts, and feelings. And so what you could try to do is just grab some paper and start writing whatever comes into your mind. And whenever your mind shifts to something else, continue to write. And write constantly for 5 minutes. Now that may appear like a long time, and it is, but you might be surprised at the number of things that would have gone through your mind through the entire 5-minute period of time, and how disjointed some of those things could be. Your thoughts, your feelings, what your experience is in the moment, temperature, body awareness, ideas, just continuously write. And we'll look at, in terms of what we'll do in this particular week, because we're going to look at not really just what is consciousness, but really what are the different states or altered states of consciousness, and things that we can do to change our awareness. Now, in every culture around the world has found ways to induce altered states of consciousness for many different purposes. In some cultures, inducing a trance is somewhat a ritualistic experience. The spiritual possessions, religious rites, tribal ceremonies, whether they're using an excessive amount of sensory stimulation, such as repetitive chanting and whirling in circles and burning strong, pungent incenses. So when we think in terms of altered states, one of the first things that we can consider would be our sleep state. And one of the things that guides, if you will, going to sleep and waking up is what's called our circadian rhythms. And what you're seeing here is basically a 24-hour clock that looks at the sort of experiences that, based on hormonal shifts in our body and releases from our adrenal glands, can have a huge impact on the course of the day, and why it is that we are awake during the daytime and asleep at night. Going to bed at certain times, the body is dropping in body temperature, and so we sleep best at lower temperatures. Waking up, the adrenal gland releases large doses of hormones to wake us up. So what changes do you notice over a 24-hour period? Well, there you see an example. Now this can be certainly affected based on individuals, but it also affects the other things that we do in our life, whether you're a shift worker, whether you travel a lot and have what's called jet lag and move from time zone to time zone. So things that are affected by our 24-hour period, we would call things like our appetite, biological patterns that occur in more than one time a day are called ultradian rhythms, and these are the things like appetite, hunger, energy, going to the washroom, sleep, alertness, sleepiness, temperature. These are all things that adjust on the course of a 24-hour day. The infradian rhythms, these would include more along the lines of secretion of hormones, and this includes also the menstruation cycle, blood pressure, heart rate. Now, this circadian rhythm is deep inside the brain, and it's a rhythm that is essentially in balance, but we can certainly disrupt our circadian rhythms and cause difficulties in either awake time or sleep time. Now, the suprachiasmatic nucleus is what's a small structure that's in the brain's hypothalamus, and this is what controls our circadian rhythms. It's like our biological clock. Now, if this gets disrupted, we can have different kinds of experiences. Now, one of the ones that we see associated with young people a lot is what's called the delayed sleep phase syndrome. And this is where people will have difficulty sleeping, particularly falling asleep. It's brought on by hormonal changes, and it's maintained by staying up late. Most common among adolescents and young adults, and is treated by avoiding meals and social activities between 1 and 4 a.m. You know, that makes sense, of course, because you're disrupting the circadian rhythm, and when you disrupt that rhythm, it can affect your sleep ability and the ability to fall asleep. Now, another experience that some of you may have experienced is what's called jet lag. And jet lag is the effect of the disruption of your circadian rhythms from sunlight at different times. So it affects sleeping and therefore alertness and functioning. Certain jobs certainly are affected by jet lag more frequently. Airline pilots, for example. Or people, as a result of the job that they do, travel a lot and across time zones. Now, one of the more common ways of disrupting circadian rhythms is through what we know as shift work. With shift work, it's the time during a 24-hour period when the biological clock is telling people to go to sleep. It can affect all sorts of elements about who we are and what our day is like. The energy and efficiency are at their lowest points when we're going through this adjustment of circadian rhythms due to a shift work. Our reaction times are at the slowest. Productivity diminishes. Industrial accidents are higher. Daylight savings time in the spring is associated with short-term 6.5% increase in accidental deaths. Now, to reduce the effects, there's a number of things that we can do. One of the things would be, in terms of your work schedule, is moving work schedules forward from days to evenings and to nights, making the adjustment easier. Rotating shifts every 3 weeks lessens the effect on sleep. Now, there's other strategies that can be employed, and many people find their own. One that's really an important variable is that when you are doing shift work, is that when you start to get into your sleep pattern and getting to sleep during the daytime, you do what you can and everything you can to make that a dark space, not allowing light to get in, because it's the light coming in that affects our circadian rhythm. So we have to make sure that it's good and dark. Now, there's another element about circadian timing and neurological disorders, and that is what's known as sundowners. Sundowners is seen in people experiencing Alzheimer's and dementia, and they exhibit more symptoms during the night. They're more active in the night, and it's a lot to do with the circadian rhythm, and the timing of such is out of whack. And so you might wonder, in terms of, well, we have these disruptions, but why do we sleep? Well, there's a couple of theories. One of the theories, restorative theory, holds that being awake produces wear and tear on the body and the brain, and sleep serves as a function of restoring the body and the mind. You could also look at Circadian theory, and it's based on the premise that sleep evolved to keep humans out of harm's way during the dark of the night and possibly becoming prey to some nocturnal predator. Thank goodness that that's typically not something we have to deal with today. Now, there's two sorts of broad labels for sleep. There's NREM, or non-rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. Now, if we look at some of what characterizes non-rapid eye movement sleep, we will see that it consists of 4 stages. Non-rapid eye movement is 4 stages of sleep, and it's basically characterized by slow, regular respiration and heart rate, a little bit of body movement, absence of rapid eye movements, and the blood pressure and brain activity are at their 24-hour low points. Now, for rapid eye movement sleep, there are shifts that occur both internally and externally. When we look at what goes on internally, we see there's an increase in brain activity. The brain's metabolism increases, and the brain temperature rises rapidly. Endorphins release leads to an increase in blood pressure, heart rate, and respiration. It seems kind of bizarre that we're in sleep, and yet we seem to be fairly alert, or at least active, in that sleep state. And then externally, you might appear calm. The large muscles become paralyzed. Now, by paralyzed, they don't mean you cannot move, but you are not moving. Your eyes will dart around during rapid eye movement sleep. If you've ever seen anybody in REM sleep, you will notice that their eyes appear to be rotating around or moving back and forth inside their head or beneath the eyelids. Dreaming occurs about 80% in 80% of people. So even if you don't remember a dream, it doesn't mean you haven't dreamed. The brain consolidates learning all night. Studying doesn't help. All-night studying doesn't help is what I'm getting at. The brain, in some theories, will say it's consolidating information while we sleep. Perceptual skills increase after 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and memory consolidation can occur during this sleep at times, and not for everybody. Now, there are sleep cycles. I mentioned that non-rapid eye movement has 4 stages of sleep, whereas rapid eye movement has 5 stages. And essentially, stage 1 is a light sleep. You're moving from drowsiness into an early stage, if you will. Alpha waves are pretty strong at this time. You move to stage 2. It's a lighter, slightly deeper sleep. You're starting to produce what are called sleep spindles. Then we get into 3rd stage, and we see this is a deeper sleep, and we see more delta waves at this time. And these are slow wave sleep signals, or waves at this time. In stage 4, it's very deep sleep. We see it diminishes after about 40 minutes. And then in stage 5, it's the rapid eye movement stage, and this is where we would report dreaming. And then the stages repeat back to 1. Now, on average, these cycles run about 90 minutes. And so it's not the same for everybody, but most people run about a 90-minute sleep cycles through 5 stages of sleep, and then they repeat. So when you're actually feeling tired in the morning, it's not because you didn't get enough sleep. Oftentimes it's because you interrupted a sleep cycle, or 1 to 5, you woke up at stage 3. So, for example, having 11 hours of sleep isn't too much or too little. What matters is did you have a full cycle or increments of a full cycle? So it's better to have an hour and a half than 2 hours. It's better to have 3 than 4. It's better to have 4.5 than it is to have 5, and it's better to have 6 than it is to have 6.5. So doing these increments is what makes sleep more full and complete and feeling more alert after. Now, this image here is just reminding us that we don't, as we get older, need as much sleep. Newborns need the most sleep, and of course, there's an awful lot going on in a child's brain than there is in an adult's brain at night. They're doing so much more growth and development. It varies over time. The older we get, the less sleep we need. There are also two types of, if you will, broad categories of people. One known as larks. These are people who like to wake up early and they're ready to go as soon as they wake up. This is due to a fast body temperature rise, and usually they're good till about 7:30, and then they often tend to be earlier to bed. That doesn't mean going to bed at 7:30, but I mean they start to wind down and their body starts to shut down around 7:30, and they're usually in bed much earlier than someone who is an owl. Now the owl is slow to wake up. Their body temperature rises more slowly, and then they're good to go later in the evening. Sleep deprivation. This is where you don't get enough sleep. This reduces the amount of REM sleep, and it results in difficulty in concentrating, attention lapses, general irritability, decreased cognitive functioning, impaired learning, and the potential for some people to experience what are called micro sleeps. And this is where you are, awake at one moment, and then for 2 or 3 seconds you're having a little, puppy nap, and then you're back at it again, and then you have these little micro sleeps. When it comes to dreams, we have REM dreams and non-REM dreams. REM dreams are almost continually occurring during the REM sleep, and it has more story-like qualities. They're vivid, they're visual, and there's an emotional foundation to it, whereas non-REM dreams, they don't happen as frequently, and they're less memorable than our REM dreams. There are also things called lucid dreams. These are dreams of an individual is aware of dreaming. So when you're dreaming, you're aware that you're dreaming, and you're often able to influence the outcome of the dreams while dreaming. So you're in a lighter stage of sleep, really, as opposed to in a deep-rooted sleep. Now, it seems that a lot of times people like to try to interpret dreams. And the cognitive theory about dreams is that dreams are thinking while you're asleep. That is to say, you're problem solving, you're creatively thinking about solutions, you're being inspired. However, there's no search for meaning during dreams about your dreams. The dreams are what they are. They're dreams. But they can be a focus point or a problem solving opportunity while we're dreaming. Now, the activation synthesis hypothesis, this is where dreams are the brain's attempt to make sense of the random firings of the brain cells during sleep. That is to say, in complete contradiction to cognitive theory, is that they're saying that there is no practical purpose behind dreams. They are just random firings of the brain, sort of sputtering on through the night, and dreams are the brain's attempt to make sense of those things. So they have no real particular meaning. That people impose the meaning on random mental activities. And then there's the revolutionary theory of dreaming, and these vivid REM dreams enable people to rehearse the skills needed to fend off predators. Now, predators can be loosely defined as, preparations for events that may in the future cause us some difficulty. Now, as far as sleep, there are a number of other possibilities. There's parasomnias. And parasomnias are waking behaviors and physiological states that occur in sleep. That is to say that while you're sleeping, these waking behaviors occur. Now, one of the ones we've heard of before is sleepwalking, somnambulism. And this is where it occurs during a partial arousal during stage 4 sleep. And the person who is sleepwalking isn't fully cognizant of their walking while sleeping and not always certain about what they're doing, and yet they are still able to navigate around a building or go outside and not, get themselves in serious trouble. Now, another version of parasomnia is what's known as sleep terrors. And this happens during partial arousal again in stage 4 sleep, and it usually begins with a piercing scream. Now, if you've had children, who have had night terrors, this is something that you would be familiar with. Now, oftentimes it occurs more frequently with children than it does with adults. It still can occur in adulthood. Nightmares we would be familiar with are frightening dreams, and these occur, unlike the others in stage 4, this occurs in REM sleep stage 5. So they tend to be more vivid, they tend to be more and more memorable. And then lastly is another example known as sleep talking, and this occurs during any stage of sleep. Now the thing to bear in mind is that sleep talkers, what they may be saying, absolutely have no meaning in particular. They're just random words popping out. Now it may sound like there's some specific meaning, but oftentimes they're just words that are expressed and said, and then that's it. There's not any sort of real meaning. They're random words. Other times it's quite obvious that there's no meaning to the phrases or things that are being said. So that you can't just listen to your partner's sleep talking and think you're going to hear secrets. Now, parasomnia are waking activities while asleep. Now, dyssomnia, these would be timing, quality, or quantity of sleep impairment. So either it's the timing of sleep, or it's the quantity of amount of sleep, or it's the quality of that sleep. Now, the few things that we can touch base on is one is narcolepsy. This is an incurable sleep disorder, and it's characterized by excessive daytime sleepiness and uncontrollable attacks of REM sleep. Now, unlike what most of us experience through sleep, we go through stage 1, 2, 3, 4 REM. Someone with narcolepsy goes automatically right into REM sleep, and they just drop where they are. Now, I had a student in my class one time who had narcolepsy who chose not to use medication, and she brought a friend with her so that when she started to go down, her friend could put something in a pillow in front of her head so it wouldn't slam on the table. And she got through her schooling this way, and it was quite remarkable. Now, narcolepsy is not the only dyssomnia. You can also find sleep apnea. And sleep apnea is something that more people are becoming familiar with. And this is periods of sleep where breathing stops. Now, if you have a sleeping partner who has sleep apnea, it can be quite frightening, because you hear them sleep and then all of a sudden you hear them exhale and you're waiting for them to inhale, and they don't for an extraordinary, much longer than would be considered normal. Now, they can, as you see in the image, wear a mask which would allow them to continue on breathing and getting in oxygen. And then lastly is one you've probably heard of, and that is insomnia. This is difficulty falling or staying asleep, waking too early, sleeping a light sleep that you're always very restless, you have a poor quality. Some people's insomnia can be quite severe, where they really don't get any quality sleep, and it affects their health, their concentration, and their life in a very significant way. Okay, this is the end of the first part of what we'll do in this chapter, and I'll put in week 6 the next piece on sleeping, on altered states, and we'll look at meditation, hypnosis, and I just lost the term I wanted to use. Psychoactive drugs. There we go. All right, so thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.